Welcome to episode 157 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary, with Kristen
and Catherine, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all of the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hey, Kristen.
Hi, Catherine.
So, I guess there's a bit of book gossip that we'll talk about this week.
Yes, there's announcements. Well, we've heard of two, but there could be more.
Yes, yeah. So one that I just saw, like, scrolling through Instagram, and I feel like a lot of authors, or, like, I see Rebecca Yarros do it a lot, where, like, she's having, like, these sessions where she's just answering questions, and I guess Ali Hazelwood did a similar one for Deep End, and somebody asked about Bride, because of, like, the second book in the Bride series, because apparently that was actually supposed to come out before Deep End. But she said that it is written already, so I guess it's just in the, like, post stage. Like, I don't know if that means editing. I don't know if that means it's done editing. I don't know. Anyway, but she basically then told the crowd that the second Bride book is supposed to come out October 7th, which seems really soon for, like, not having announced it before now.
Maybe it just, like, I will say that I've heard just from people on the sites, I find that Bride is a little bit contentious for people. Like, people that, and I know that you've read everything that she's written, so, like, yeah. I'm discounting you as a person.
Thank you.
But I've heard a lot of people who have read her other stuff and then read Bride are not really as into it. So yeah, maybe it's a bit more of a divisive book, which is why she's not publicizing it as much.
Yeah, and I get that, because, like, her other books are contemporary romance. Yeah. Like, if that's what you read,
yes,
Bride is a very big detour. Yeah, and for some people, it's their first, like, fantasy / paranormal, whatever. Like, it's their first foray into that. Whereas for me, I'm like, something with a vampire and someone whose writing I like. Because, like, yeah.
Which is why I discount you as a person in this instance, because I already know that you would read it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I know that it's your jam, but, like, for most for most Ali Hazelwood readers, maybe that's not automatically their scene, so it's maybe not where they want to live. So I've heard a lot of people on, like, social media just sort of be like, I didn't really like it. Some people didn't finish it. Like, just thought it was maybe a bit too much of a departure from what they know and love from Ali.
Which is, it's kind of funny, because, like, I did finish Deep End after, and Deep End is really, like, is kind of different from her other books as well, in that, like, they have a very dom-sub relationship, which, like, is different than, I would say, most contemporary romances that, like, you would read. So I wonder if that book is getting the same kind of discourse around it. I haven't really seen anything. I've seen a different author that we read, Katie Roberts. She did a post, and she was like, because of all of the Deep End, like, discourse happening, I just got the book or something. So, like, there's discourse happening about it somewhere, but I haven't seen any. But I wonder if people are, like, not enjoying that part of it, because I loved it, obviously, but I just read that shit anyway.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, because, like, I guess it's a completely different conversation, but, like, you really do put authors in boxes once they, like, write their first few books. And if they try to do something different, people are like, nope. And it's the same with any kind of artist, really, like musicians and stuff. Like, I don't know. I like her writing, and I like her characters, so
yeah,
when she writes something different, I'm kind of, like, all for it, because it is generally I'll get something that's more of my jam, like paranormal or like darker. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah. I think I did see on Facebook some people talking about Deep End.
Oh, yeah?
Maybe not in a super positive way, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find it now. But yeah, I feel that, like, as much as I want to say, oh, okay. So, hang on, I lied. I just looked it up, and actually, a lot of people are saying positive things about Deep End.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. People are saying that they think it could be their favorite
of her books?
Yeah, their favorite one that she's ever written.
She wrote in the beginning of it, I guess, like, the dedication section, that it was her favorite book that she's ever written. So.
Anyway, but yeah, so.
Interesting.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying that they do like it and that it is, like, one of their favorites. I actually just finished reading a book called, what is it called? It was called Praise. And it was the first book in the Salacious Players Club series.
It sounds familiar.
By Sarah Kate.
Okay.
Anyway, so it's all about, like, this group of guy friends that they each have, like, their own sort of, not unique in that no one else has it, but maybe they each have, like, their own unusual sort of sex thing. And so they decided that they're gonna open their own, like, they open a sex club.
Yeah.
And make it, like, okay for people with kinks, and it's like a members only thing, and it's okay for people with kinks to go there, and, like, they have all these rooms and stuff.
Explore their kinks, yeah.
Yeah. So, the first one, this guy, he's like 40 years old, and his son, he, like, co-signed on an apartment for him. And then all of a sudden, a girl shows up at his door, and it's his son's ex-girlfriend. She came for her half of the deposit.
Oh, I've read this book.
Have you?
Yeah.
And, like,
it's like
the housekeeper, like, thinks that she's one of his, like, girls. So she's like, you better go in there and kneel on the floor. And she's like, what? Why? And then the guy comes in and he's like, why aren't you kneeling? So she does. And she's shocked at how much she likes it.
Yeah, I read that book.
Did you? Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, this sounds familiar, but...
Anyway, I really like it. Although, I'm sorry, it's not realistic. Like, I've read a few of these books where girl breaks up with boy, meets his dad, and, like, they end up falling for each other. Like, I've read several. Maybe possibly more than I want to admit.
Yeah.
However, I don't find it realistic that, like, because it's the same plot all the time, right? It's they don't want each other because, you know, oh, that's my ex-boyfriend's dad, or oh, that's my son's ex-girlfriend. I can't. But then they're so drawn to each other that it happens, and they keep it a secret, and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, the son walks in and finds out, and it's, like, really awkward and terrible, and the son hates it. But then, always in the end, the dad tells the son how much he loves her, and how much he can't live without her, and blah, blah, blah. And then the son accepts it. And I can't imagine that happening in real life.
Did you read the Birthday Girl one by, what's her name? Well, there's the Katie Roberts one.
Yeah.
It's like the short story. You definitely read that one.
Oh, yeah, it's, what's it called? My boyfriend's dad, or something like that.
Yeah, it's literally in the title. Penelope Douglas, Birthday Girl. I liked that one. It's kind of the exact same thing, but I think I read it on Kindle Unlimited. But if you're looking for more of the same.
Yeah. Here it is. Your Dad Will Do. That's what it's called. Your Dad Will Do. The Katie Robert one. And it is really good. I am not gonna lie. Yeah. It is great.
Yeah, agreed.
Anyway, I don't know what... Anyway, we're gonna move on to the next bit of news.
Gossip?
Yes, the next bit of news that hurt my soul.
A little... But I see.
I know.
So,
I know.
Valentine's Day is when apparently it actually happened. So, we got confirmation that the ACOTAR series with Hulu is not happening. And I thought we already knew that. I thought we already had that confirmed. But turns out we didn't, I guess.
I don't think they fully trashed it.
Yeah. But it is, like, the things that I've seen about it is kind of, like, a good thing. Because Hulu that was the one where they were, like, 2 strong opinions, blah, 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 blah. And, like, kind of bashing, we're assuming Sarah J. Maas.
Yes.
On, like, wanting things her way in her own book series. Yeah. Which is not finished, so, like, makes sense. But this means that, like, maybe somebody else will pick it up. And, like, I've seen a lot of people, like, obviously people want HBO to pick it up because it would be a, like, better production.
Oh, and they would actually include, like, sexy bits.
Yeah. My God. If it doesn't have sexy bits, throw the whole show out.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm hoping that this means that, like, now that it's finally axed, that she can actually, like...
shop it around.
Yeah, and hopefully... get herself a better deal where she has more say and people aren't as bitchy about it, maybe. So, I'm hoping it's good news, but, you know. And also, I don't even know if I want an adaptation of it. You know.
Yeah. I agree with you. I find that we always get really excited when books are like, yeah, we're gonna do a movie or a TV show, and we're like, yes, we want this so bad, and it's always awful.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't know. I agree, like, so many people are saying that it needs to be a cartoon series. Yeah. And a part of me is like, I actually do think that would be for the best. Like, anime sort of style.
Yeah, not like a kid's cartoon. No. Obviously. But, yeah, I think Throne of Glass would be a great cartoon. I think they could make a good ACOTAR with real people, but I just don't know if they will.
But, like, I just find that, like, everybody has such strong opinions on the actors and actresses that, like, people are never going to be happy, and, like, you're going to have to do so many casting calls to find the right people. Because everybody has, like, who they think should play in... You know what I mean? In mind?
Yeah. Yeah.
So. Yeah,
it's gonna be hard. But that's like Fourth Wing is apparently like it's gotta be some kind of in production.
Yeah.
Like people are speculating that certain people are already cast and stuff. Like we don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that is moving faster.
Yeah.
But I don't know what's happening with that either. So hopefully they're good, I guess. I worry. But for that one, I'm like, they're fucking dragons. Although the new How to Train Your Dragon live action is coming out, and it looks exactly like the cartoon, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about it, because on one hand, I'm like, I like that it's the same, but then it's like, is it just the same movie? Like, what's the point?
Yeah. But I find that they do that too, like, with the all the Disney princess movies that they're making live action, is it's literally almost in some cases word for word the same as the cartoon. Yeah. But they're just making it live action. And it's sort of like, well, why?
Yeah, why not come up with a new story?
Yeah. But anyway.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay. So that's our gossip and some books we've recently read and a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, it was a very random discussion this week.
Yeah. We had a plan coming in, and then we just did whatever.
It went off the rails.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's our third week reading Bride by Ali Hazelwood. So last week, I have no fucking idea. I feel like I haven't looked at this in ages. So last week they went to visit Emery. Was their big thing.
Yes.
So they're speculating that she is the one that is like the head of the Loyals and funding them and she maybe tried to kidnap Anna. But they don't have any real proof. It's mostly like they've heard that she is unhappy with the way things are, and they're like, it must be her, she's the villain.
Yeah, well, because she's the leader, right? So they would assume that she's the one sort of spreading it around. However, they have no proof.
Yeah. So Lowe was going to go by himself and try to like hack her computers, but he's totally useless at computers. So Misery offered to go with him, and he was like, no. And then he was like, fine, but I'm going to have to mark you. And it's a completely sexually charged situation where he like bites and licks and touches her, and it's hot.
It is hot, yeah. And they both got like a little bit too into it.
Yes. So did I.
Yeah.
So they had supper, I think, with her, and everyone just keeps serving Misery food. It's like she's not going to eat it. So it's
I know,
silly.
it is a waste. But doesn't Lowe like, or no, that's a different scene. Never mind.
It comes up. But yeah, so then they went back to the room. Oh, and they're having this big discussion about mates. And, like, he says his mate doesn't reciprocate. And she's like, but you didn't tell your mate. So it's, like, this whole thing. And she thinks his mate is Gabby, who was traded as collateral, like, her opposite. So they're having, like, a conversation about mates a lot. And he gets kind of annoyed at her for, like, assuming she knows anything. And he, like, we all know that she's his mate.
Yep.
But she doesn't know that because somebody told her that it was Gabby.
Yes.
So it's not really her fault, and he's not telling her. So it's like a thing. And then it ended off that she helps him get to sleep by, like, playing with his hair. And he has insomnia, so it's like a big deal. So our third week, we're doing chapters 16 to 24. And it starts off like they all do with the little quote at the beginning. And it says, he pictures her in the bath and he has filthy, unspeakable thoughts and he's too tired to stop himself. And it's like, okay.
I mean, everyone has fantasies.
Yeah. Oops. So it's hot. What we're getting is it's hot. So she wakes up and she's in the closet. So I guess in the middle of the night, she moved herself to the closet. And there's a note from Lowe saying that he went on a run and to be good. And she doesn't really know why, but she, like, puts the note in her luggage and just keeps it. And it kind of reminds her of, like, Serena used to keep candy wrappers when she was a child to, like, remind herself of it. And they got into a fight about it. And Serena called her a bleach because she tried to call her a bitch and a leech at the same time.
Ah!
And I kind of like it. Like when you mix up words.
Yeah.
And then their fight, like, completely dissolved because they just started laughing over bleach. So she gets in the tub and then Lowe shows up and, like, asks if she's dressed, and she, like, moves some bubbles around to, like, cover herself so she's not completely naked, and says that he can come in. So he does, and he's just like, you said you weren't naked. And she's like, I'm covered. And he's, like, shirtless. I kind of love it, but he's also shirtless and sweaty, and she's like, you're basically naked too, and she's, like, so turned on by how hot he is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, fair.
Yeah.
But he tells her that he lost his shirt while on a run with Cohen? Is that what we're calling him?
Yeah, that's what I've been calling him.
Okay. And she, like, thinks he looks happy. So, like, she's happy that he was able to go out with Cohen. And I'm like, for some reason, I am into, like, I know what happens in the book a little bit. I don't really remember. But I immediately got that worry that Cohen is actually the bad guy. And I can't really remember. I remember some of the stuff that happens at the end of the book, but I'm worried that he's part of the problem.
I'm not saying a word.
Do you remember?
Yeah, because after I finished my notes for this week, I just kept reading because I was in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know one person that turns out, and like there's lots of hints of it kind of this week. But I also was like, I don't know. I can't remember everything. But anyway.
Yeah.
So he sits by her feet and she's just like asks him if she can see his wolf form. And she kind of teases him about it because he says no. And she's like, why? It's like your fur hot pink. But he's like, he's not going to shift in the middle of the bathroom, I guess. I don't know why, but okay. And he like starts caressing her leg and like holding her ankle. And it's like, he can't keep his hands off of her.
Although, like, it is very, like, movie-ish. Like, she's sitting in the tub covered in bubbles, but has her leg out. Like, that is a very, like, no one does that when they're getting a bath.
Yeah. No. Baths aren't big enough.
No. Normal baths.
my tits are just out. You can put as many bubbles over them as you want, but they're still out. So he'd be holding those on me.
Love it.
Yeah. So he tells her then that he talked to Cohen and he's going to distract Emery while they set up the code or whatever. But he asked not to know exactly what they were doing because he wanted plausible deniability. And we get that Emery is actually his aunt. So Emery is Cohen's aunt. But Cohen hated Roscoe, so he's fine with betraying her, I guess.
That's nice of him.
Interesting. So basically after supper, they're going to say that she needs to feed, and then they're going to go hack into the computers. So we kind of jump to supper now, and Misery thinks that Cohen is like super entertaining, but he's a bit of an asshole. And he like at the supper table thanks Lowe for the fact that he doesn't have to hear one of Roscoe's rants.
In front of Roscoe's mate that is totally devastated that he is dead.
Yeah, so maybe this is why I'm like, he seems like a bad person. Because, like, you can hate somebody, but you don't have to be a dick in front of their, like, grieving mate.
Oh, God, it was bad.
Yeah, right? And he also gives Misery, like, a bear hug and is, like, nice to her, whereas most people aren't. I guess the like supper has a whole bunch of the old seconds, and I'm like, I thought they were all dead, but okay. But one of them, John, is wearing a purple vial, and Lowe like stares him down until he submits, and the next time she sees him, the purple vial is gone. So like obviously it was vampire blood. Emery starts talking about like the tri-alliance between humans, vampires, wares, and Lowe just tells her like once Garcia's term starts, like it's done and it's in place. And she says it's kind of a slap in the face to all the were who died against other species. And this were Amanda, who came with Cohen, like rolls her eyes, and like her and Misery kind of have a look between them during this moment, and she's like feels more welcome, I guess, with her. And then she ends up giving this Amanda person her supper instead of Cohen and Lowe, who are like fighting over it, because obviously she's not going to eat it. And Lowe says the Alliance is keeping his pack alive, and she asks Cohen if he's worried, and he says no, and he says he doesn't like to stir up shit with other species like her. So they're all being really bitchy to her, and she's just like having them over for supper. And like we really have no proof that she's behind some of this stuff, and you're like, this is a bit intense, but okay.
She is definitely, they are definitely like not being gracious guests.
And then Emery makes a comment about like, yeah, some of you even take vampire spouses, and Lowe like calls himself lucky. And then he's like, Misery, do you need to feed? And it's like a seamless transition of like, you know.
Yeah.
They're going to go spy stuff. So they leave. And while they're walking to, I guess, the office, which, how do they know where it is? But okay. They talk about Cohen a bit. He's like unfiltered honesty, and he actually became an alpha after his mother died, which is interesting because we didn't really get that was, it doesn't seem like that's the way you become an alpha, but people did challenge him and he won, so like he kept the title kind of thing. And she asks if him and Amanda are together, and we get that the alpha of his pack actually takes a vow of celibacy.
Oh,
why?
Shit.
And she's like, do you take one of those?
I don't understand that. How,
why?
How is he supposed to have children? What if he meets his mate?
Yeah, if his mom was the alpha, then how did,
she had
I don't
to
get
have had him. Unless she
maybe
had
it was
him
before she became
alpha, but
yeah.
So what, is he gonna have to give up his alpha-ship if he meets his mate and wants to, have sex?
Yeah. I don't really understand it. And he kind of says, they generally take a vow of celibacy, so can you, decide not to? But I think the point is so that they are more focused on their job and not focused on a person. Kind of like Juno was like, I wish he'd never found his mate so that he would focus on the pack more.
That's true, yeah.
But still shitty. So yeah, she asks if he took one, and he says it feels like it. And we're just like, what? Okay. So they get to the office, and she kneels down to open the door with her lock picking skills, and he says he's imagined her doing that ... And then he's like, to open my bedroom door, I mean, when you broke into my room. And we're like, you imagined her with your dick in her mouth. Yeah. That is what you were thinking.
Yeah.
And then he says that she went through his underwear. And she's like, sorry about that. And she feels awkward, but he's like, okay, inside, he's going to hide her scent, but she needs to touch as little as possible because her scent is obvious. So she goes to the computer. And we get that Lowe apparently put bugs in the house already, but she's setting up some software to track Emery's correspondences and to look at the old shit and to see any going forward kind of thing. And he asks if she needs help, and she kind of teases him and tells him that she needs something techie, and he's like, ugh, and she's like, no, I just need you to stand guard. And then she says it's going to be 6 minutes and asks if that's too long, but he's just like, no, they won't know how long it takes for you to feed. And she kind of takes that as a compliment. And she thinks he's complimenting her for being low maintenance. But he's like, no, that's not what I was saying. And he says that she needs better compliments if that's what she thinks a compliment is. And she needs to be told how intelligent and skilled and brave, and despite acting heartless, genuinely caring and resilient and very beautiful to look at. So he's going on and on about all of the things he wants to compliment her about. But then they hear someone coming. And he's like, it's Emery's guards. And Lowe goes to turn off the computer, but she's like, no. And she's in her head, she thinks that what she does is super cliche. And obviously it is. But she pushes him up against the fireplace and tells him to kiss her. And he just says they think she's feeding, so she needs to bite him. And she doesn't want to, but they're coming, so she bites his neck.
Woo!
Hot.
It is hot.
So we get another chapter start, and we get, he was always comfortable with sex and knew what he liked, and he was content. And now he can't remember what satisfaction feels like. Okay. So she thinks, obviously we're in her point of view, she thinks, she knows what to do, even though she's the worst vampire ever. And she, smells his neck to find, the spot where it smells the sweetest. And then she, like, lightly kisses him, and then she bites down. And it's unlike anything she's ever tasted. And she thinks, like, he tastes like his scent, and his blood is everything. And she just, like, starts drinking it. And I really assumed that she was going to drink too much, but...
I know, but I like that she doesn't. Like...
And it's not even a conversation.
No.
Yeah,
I like
me
that,
too.
because so many vampire tropes is, like, they get into this frenzy while feeding and lose all rational thought. And I like that this is not like that. Like, she's still in her right mind. Yeah. And, like, to be fair, it doesn't even seem like they need very much. Like,
no,
blood bags are, what, like a pint? So, like, it's like she's... Or I don't actually know. But
yeah. And, like, there's probably different size blood bags, but, like, I'm thinking of, like, when you get blood taken, or, like, when you give blood.
It's like an IV. It's like in one of those IV bags.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a whole lot. And it doesn't... Like, I don't know, does she drink one every day? Yeah. Like, we don't even know.
She does. She has to drink one a day.
One a day? Okay. So, yeah. She is distracted drinking his blood, and she hears words like Lowe, wife, and feeding, and an apology, and then the guards leaving. But she can't really focus on the words or anything else. And Lowe says her name, but she wants more, and she wants to, like, climb under his skin. And we're like, just have sex. Like,
can I just ask, okay, here's my only issue. And I know that they're going to explain something. I don't understand why they said, oh, excuse me, she has to go feed. What is their excuse for feeding in that room as opposed to their bedroom?
Yeah, it's very flimsy.
Like, I understand what I don't remember them having a good reason why they went there instead of their room.
It does come up in a second, but it's not a good reason.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah. So he holds her ass, and she, like, wraps her legs around him, and he tells her to take more, and she moans, and he says, take all you need, which is why I was kind of like,
yeah,
she's gonna drain him fucking dry.
Much, yeah.
And she, like, grinds against his hard erection and comes, and we're like, wild. Yeah. Okay. And, of course, it's amazing. And then she, like, laps at his neck like a kitten. And it, like, seals the wound, basically. Which is cool. And I love that in a vampire thing. And then she just, like, feels amazing for a second. And then she starts to panic. And she's like, put me down. And she apologizes. And she's like, says she's never done it before. And then she asks if she hurt him. And he just shakes his head. And Lowe asks if she's okay. And she can tell that, like, he's still super hard. And she says she doesn't think she's okay. But then they hear more people, and she grabs, like, the USB stick thing and makes it look like she didn't touch anything on the computer. So that all got set up. And she asks if Lowe's okay, because he's not moving to, like, help her or anything. And he tells her to come back, and he just hugs her. And he says he could fuck her nicely now. And that he almost did. And she apologizes and said that she didn't know. And it's kind of a moment of, like, when he murked her, he was like, I didn't know it would get that sexual. Yeah. And she bit him, and she's like, I didn't realize that this would get that sexual. Yeah. So, like, they're both having the moment.
They're realizing things about their own species that they never realized before.
Of course. And he says he's never felt like this before, like, so turned on and smitten and other things. like she's your mate. And she apologizes and says it's her fault. And she says she'll ask her brother if, like, that's normal. And then she's like, but she knows in her sense, in herself, in her, like, whatever, that she knows that was right. And we're getting, like, in a mate sense, it was right. Like, that's what they, yeah. Lowe asks if she had enough, and she says yes, but she thinks that she does want more. And then Emery walks in. And she says she thought her guards hallucinated, and she must have left the door unlocked. And that's just it. That's all that's...
Yeah, but, like, that's what I mean. It's like, yeah, she is saying, oh, sorry, I thought I locked this door.
Yeah, but that's it. But, like, that's all they're talking about.
They don't say, why were you in here and not your room? Like, keep that shit contained.
100%. But the fact that they're disrespecting her in every other way while she's, like, feeding them, it's really not surprising that they're like, and fuck her, we're gonna feed in her office.
Fuck in her office.
Right?
Because, like, he still has an erection, so, like, theoretically, and, like, also theoretically, as we love to hear, like, they're werewolves. They can probably smell
arousal.
Yeah, and, like, the fact that she came, like, they could probably smell.
Oh my god, yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like... But again, if it were me, I'd be like, go to your room and do this. Like, come on, guys. Like, you have a room for a reason.
I wonder if, like, it's closer to the dinner table, so they were like...
Quick.
Yeah, I don't know. It makes no sense. She just seems like she must not be good at computers either, because she's just, like, so, I don't know, not trusting, but she's just like, no, it's fine.
She is very trusting, though.
Yeah. I guess that is the right word. Anyway, so she was like, she thought her guards were hallucinating, and she says she assumed that he meant ... and we know, like, they would go to her room and drink a blood bag. And he's just like, never assume. And Cohen is just like, he says he's glad the kids are having fun. and then Emery's like, well, we were waiting for you to have dessert. And then Cohen's just like, they already had dessert. And Emery's just disgusted by it, which is just funny.
She seems very prudish.
Yeah, she's very against vampires. And, like, you can't really be surprised when, like, she was married to a bigoted, shitty man.
Yeah.
Like, so. So she leaves, and Cohen kind of implies that the way that Lowe is acting is because he found her. And, like, she's behind Lowe's back right now, and he's, like, protecting her kind of way. And it's very much like Faye Mates thing. It's, like, the same old story. And then Cohen says that Cal called him, and he needs them to come home tonight, and it's something about Anna. So, that's not good.
No. Oh my god. Has someone tried to kidnap her again?
Right. That would be unfortunate, since they're literally with the person they suspect.
Keep the trauma consistent, though.
Right.
Because, like, you know, if they tried something else, then she'd be traumatized in more ways.
Yeah. Well, I agree. So we get another quote, and it's, her presence soothes him more than a full moon run. Okay.
Okay, here's what I'm wondering.
Okay.
So we know that she is his mate, right? Like, we're all assuming that, right? Yes. And I think it's obvious. That's not us inferring based on the fact that we've already read the book.
No. Like, the first time I read it, as soon as the wedding scene happened, and he was like, how do you smell like that? Like, I was like, mate.
Yeah. Okay. So, I guess my thing is, like, is he literally, like, so, he's been getting closer to her as the days and weeks go on, right? In the beginning, he tried to stay as far away from her as possible, right? He was never home. He was never around.
Yeah.
So, do we, like, I don't know. I guess I just don't understand why, like, I do now, because he just said, you know, he doesn't want to tell his mate that she's his mate because he doesn't want to feel like he's trapping her into anything. But, like, do we think that's been his plan all along? Like, from the very beginning? Or do we think that it's really developed because he's gotten to know her? Like, what was the plan in the beginning? Why not just be like, yes, hey you?
I think in the beginning it was denial and shock. So he was like, I can run away from this and maybe she's not actually my mate. Maybe I'm wrong. Because, like, she's a different species, so I feel like he was like, nah, there's no way.
Okay.
But then after that, he got to know her, I guess, and he was like, I can't take everything away from her again. I don't know. That's what I assume, but like, nothing is really said. So yeah, they basically immediately leave and fly back, and it's like a quiet flight, and Misery tries to like check if the trace works, but the Wi-Fi sucks in the air. And you're like, makes sense. Mick picks them up and says that Anna had a low fever after they left, and then she started vomiting and saying her bones hurt and she's not keeping down liquids, so like she's sick. And he's like, I should have told you, but we thought she'd be fine. And it's like, yeah. And I was like, this doesn't seem like as big of a deal as they're making it. But I get it after, like, we get a bit more information. Like, apparently wares don't get sick. So this is because she's half human.
So they just don't understand human sickness.
That makes more sense, because I was like, why are they losing their shit? Like, she just has the stomach flu. Like, it's like, it sucks, but but now I get it. And she's actually like had runny noses and stuff before, but it's only been like stuff that you could like brush off as allergies. She's never actually been sick before, like she is now.
So wares can have allergies?
I don't, it doesn't make any sense to me, but like maybe. And one of the wares is like, do we have that Tyler medicine? And Misery is like, do you mean Tylenol? And she actually goes to check on Anna, and she, like, touches her forehead, and then she goes to, like, take her hand away, but Anna asks her to keep it there because, like, she's so hot, and Misery's body temperature is cooler than humans as a vampire, so, like, it feels good. And Misery just, like, complains a little, like she always does about everything. Yeah. Which,
like, oh, I'm your cooling bag now, am I?
Yeah.
I'm your own personal like, ice pack now.
Yeah. Something like that. And then she asks how Anna's feeling, and she says she feels like she's going to vomit on her, but Misery's like, can you vomit on Sparkles first? And Anna's just like, fine. So Lowe comes in and gives her a pink giraffe and says it's like one of his gifts from California. And she's like, oh, are there giraffes in California? And he's like, no. And she's like, I want a more authentic present next time. And he was just like, okay. And Misery's like, has no idea where he got it. So it's just like, does he just have gifts like in the house? For, like...
That would be actually really funny.
He must, because like, what else
did he have a chance? He probably did it while she was asleep, though.
Yeah. When he went for his run, he just like lost his shirt and picked up a pink giraffe. Fair. She says then that she misses Mama and asks why her friend Misha gets 2 parents and she gets none. And it's like, I think it said that she's 6 and she's going to be 7 soon, but like, it's just devastating because like, it is a good point. It's very sad.
It is sad.
And he tells her like, he's very sweet and he's just like, I know it isn't fair. And then she starts like, dry retching basically, and eventually she falls asleep. Lowe then says he's going to bring her to a human doctor, and Mick agrees, but Misery says like she has the most human experiences, and Cal's like, I wouldn't say that, and she's like, well, I mean, in a non-killing way, like she grew up with humans, she knows humans. And she knows what her sister would take for viral and bacterial infections. And she's like, so she can, like, we can get those same things, and it's safer than, like, bringing her to a human doctor that might find out she's half-ware.
Can I just say, though, there is nothing for a viral infection.
Yeah.
And, like, an infection, she has a stomach flu. Where is the infection? Yeah. Like, this part took me out of it, because if you really know your shit about human sicknesses... Like, you would know, 1, Tylenol ain't doing shit. You need Advil. Right? Yeah. And 2, there is no medicine, not even, like, prescribed medication that you get from a pharmacist for a viral infection. Viral infection means it has to run its course. Yeah. Bacterial, yes, you could get antibiotics. But, like, there is nothing. And that really bothered me when I read this part.
But, like, you could still take, like, something to feel better when you have a viral infection. But it didn't really explain that well either.
Anyway, I'm sorry. This is just, I don't know why this bit bothered me, but it did. Because then they're just stuffing medicine down her throat. And I'm like, I don't understand how Misery remembers, A, dosage, B, the name of the medication. Like, there's how, like, rules on when to take it, how to take it, with food, without food. And, like, they do dosing based on weight. So, like... Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it just seems like there's no way she remembered all that to put on a prescription.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, like, if you go to a doctor, they would obviously test if it is bacterial or viral before. Like, they wouldn't just give you a whole bunch of different medication. What if they, like, mix together in a bad way? So, yeah, it's a bit unbelievable, but it's, like, fine. So Lowe asks her for the drug names, but Mick, like, really disagrees, and he's like, your sister is full human. Interesting. And what works for her might not work for a half human, half were. And Misery's just like, yeah, but if you bring her to a human doctor, they're also going to assume she's human. They're not gonna, like, unless you tell them, and then, like, you'd have to kill them, basically. Mm-hmm. And Juno says that they should trust Misery, and Mick doesn't like it and goes to complain some more, but Lowe's like, no, we'll try these medications. If it doesn't work, we'll bring her to the doctor tomorrow. So it's just interesting how against it Mick is. And it's like, why? But we'll see. So Lowe leaves and is back in less than an hour, and Misery notices that he has, like, green blood on his hands, but she thinks, at least there's no red. So, like, we don't know where he got these drugs, but he beat up some wares to get it. I don't understand.
Like, unless he beat up Mick to be like, you don't question me ever! Yeah!
That'd be funny. So Misery, like, smashes up the pills, which, like, you can't do with some pills, but okay. And she says she used to do it for Serena until, like, embarrassingly recently when she finally was able to swallow pills. As a 25-year-old.
Mm-hmm. I mean, okay, but let's be realistic. I was cutting up meat for you until, like...
Until I became vegetarian. Yes. That was a sign, though. I should have just not been eating meat. That's probably true.
I can also...
True, yeah.
I would absolutely rather smash up pills and eat it in, like, yogurt or something than swallow them whole.
Oh, I've just never had issues with pills.
I think I would. That's fair. If someone did it for me, I wouldn't do it for myself. I want someone to do it. But it's also, like,
some pills should be taken certain ways. You can't just, like, smush them and...
Can't you?
Mix them and stuff.
Can't you?
I guess it depends what it is, but, like, the slow release ones, like, should go into your stomach as a capsule. Like, you shouldn't really break those up. And then, like, I know, like, Ativan for anxiety, you put it under your tongue until it dissolves. There's just, like, different ways you take different medications. I don't know about, like, we also don't get which ones they are, so, like, we don't really know what's happening.
She just gives her, like a drug cocktail.
A shit ton, yeah.
It's like, let's see what works.
Anna complains about, like, how many, and then she's like, it tastes like poison, and everybody else is just, like, glaring at Misery, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna leave. Fair. So she goes to find Alex, and she ends up sneaking up on him, and he's just playing GTA which is funny. But he actually confirms that, like, what she did at Emery's house worked, so now they have, like, all access to her correspondence. But Alex says that she smells different, and that's why he didn't sense her coming. And it's like, of course she smells different.
I want to know how she smells.
Like, do you mean, like, description of, like, snow and pine?
No.
Or, like, do you mean...
No, I mean, does she smell like Lowe? Does she smell like sex? Like, has her scent changed based on her emotions and feelings? Like, what about her smell has changed? Is what I want to know.
So we do kind of get it. Because, so they... In a second, but she says Lowe has another project for them, and it's to get a list of humans that were part of the Human Wear Bureau 10 to 15 years ago. And she's trying to find Anna's father, basically. So they look for an hour, and they have no luck. And as she's about to leave, he's like, you smell like my alpha marked you. So I guess she still smells like being marked.
Woo!
So she smells like Lowe. So she goes over to ask about Anna, and Lowe and Juno are there and say that the fever broke and she can keep liquids down now. And she says, and Anna said that Misery's gross stuff made her feel much
After
better.
an hour. So she gave it to her, and an hour later she feels better. Yeah, what a convenient thing to happen.
Yeah, it's a good thing she doesn't feel worse, because they would have killed her. And then Juno says that Misery and Lowe make a good team, and Misery's just like, nah, it was mostly me. And Juno's just like, take the compliment. So Juno leaves, and then Misery offers Lowe her bed, and then she kind of panics because she's like, I'm not trying to sleep with you, but like, I sleep in the closet, so you can sleep in my bed because Anna's in his bed, kind of thing. So he just nods and comes into her room, and he's like staring out the window, and she asks if he's okay, and he says he doesn't know what he would have done without her. And he says he would have had to choose between Anna's health and her safety. Because obviously, like, his only real option would have been to bring her to see a human. And realistically, he would have gone to a human doctor with her, been like, she's half-wear, fix her. The doctor would have given her drugs. And then they would have killed the doctor. Like, that's...
It's not really threatening her safety at all.
Yeah, but that's the only option. He would have had to kill the doctor. Which I know is not it's not a thing in this book.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's what he would have had to do. So Misery then is like, it's fine, like, Anna's gonna be okay. But he's like, what if it was something worse? And Misery kind of thinks about it, and she, like, thinks to herself, she respects him too much to lie, and she's also terrified. Like, she kind of starts thinking of all the things that she's worried about, and, like, she wonders if Serena's alive, and what's happening between her and Lowe, and if a war is coming between their species, and she's just, like, she's not sure if Anna will be fine. So he ends up, like, sinking to his knees and buries his face in her lap, and she just, like, rubs his hair and his back, and he holds her ankle, and they stay there for a long time. And she just, like, comforts him, basically. So we get another quote, and it's, she is fearless, and the thought terrifies him. So I guess he went to sleep, or he left, or something happened. So she goes to find Ludwig and asks him if she can call her brother. And he's just like, you're allowed to do whatever you want, but maybe, he says, maybe she should avoid phone sex. And she's like, I'm calling my brother. Like, that's not, okay. And she's like, is phone sex even still a thing? And he just says all kinds of sex are a thing, and they will be until the sun swallows the earth. Like, it's fair.
Not a lie.
So she talks to her brother, and he immediately is like, who did you feed off of? Because he's not an idiot. And she asked him if there are any negative consequences to feeding. So she tells him that she did feed from Lowe, and he tells her not to tell her father that because he'll exploit it. And she's like, what do you mean? And he says Lowe's pack would be pissed that his blood is feeding his enemy. So he's actually kind of like, being nice or thoughtful or something. Like, it's interesting.
But, like...
So...
I don't remember the beginning. Like, her brother has always been, like, not a terrible person.
No, they're just kind of not super close because of the way they grew up, which is fair. Yeah. No, he's definitely not terrible, but he's like, he is still a vampire who lives in the vampire territory. And we're like, does that make him bad?
Yeah.
But I don't know. And, like, from her father, we got that, like, he isn't really thinking about, like, becoming the heir. And, like, he's not, because at one point he was like, oh, you're smart. I should have made you my heir to Misery. So he seems kind of like maybe he's like a playboy or something. Yeah. So she starts to ask about what happens when you feed from someone, and he's like, no, I'm your brother. I'm not having this conversation with you. Aww. So we can assume that it makes everyone horny to feed from someone. And he tells her that, like, there should be no negative consequences for either of them, but he says that, like, multiple feedings from the same person can actually cause, like, feelings to develop, so she needs to stop. And he tells her that, like, that's why they started drinking from blood bags, because, like, the vampires want to fuck around so that they can have more babies, so that's why they don't feed from each other, so they don't, like, start becoming monogamous with one person because they have feelings.
Which seems so silly.
Oh, yeah, 100%. But he tells her that he's happy that, like, obviously there's some friendship between her and her husband, because he's like, that means that you'll be alive.
Yeah.
And then he's like, you can do anything you want with him. He's like, build a chicken coop. You can fuck him, but you should not feed from him anymore. And we're like, of course, this is going to be a thing. Mm-hmm. So she ends up reading Anna a story, and she, like, kind of explains that it's an annoying llama who's being deservedly bullied by a goat. I don't know that story. Do you know that one? Okay. I was just wondering if it was, like,
bullied by a goat.
Yeah, like a kid's book. I can't think of one. Okay. So then she goes to the kitchen and she gets her peanut butter, and Lowe is there, and he asks her if the man that her and Alex are looking for is Anna, and she just starts to say yes, because that's the most likely the way that Serena found out. But then she's also like, when did you get back? Because they haven't seen each other in, like, 2 nights. And we also get, like, a little bit of a throwaway, but yesterday was, like, a hearing day where all the wares came to tell him their concerns, and he would just listen to them, kind of like a king does, I guess. So that's just an interesting dynamic of their world. So he asks why they're looking for Anna's father, and Misery says Serena obviously would have had to be told about Anna, so, like, that makes the most sense. And then she's like, I can stop if you want, but he just says he should have actually thought of it sooner, so he's fine with them trying to find.
Which, again, I really thought that this would, like, cause a wedge. Mm-hmm. I thought that he would be mad and be like, you should have told me. But yeah, he was fine with it.
Yeah, he's completely fine with it. He's like, I should have thought of that. It gets a tiny bit awkward because the last 2 times they were together were, like, super intimate moments. Like, she was comforting him, and then also she fed from him, and then he told her he wanted to fuck her, basically. So she just eats some peanut butter and says it's time. And she just says, like, she's gonna go have a bath, basically, so that she doesn't smell like phlegm. And they joke about, like, if phlegm has a smell, and, like, apparently we get here that vampires also don't get colds, so just interesting. Then he comes over to wipe some peanut butter off her nose, and she, like, licks it off of his thumb, and it's obviously super sexually charged. But then she kind of tries to diffuse it by saying that Anna is better, and he agrees, and he takes a step back, and she says, wait. And she asks what's happening between them. And then he says he doesn't know. And then he says, wait, that's a lie. And he says it's never far from his mind. And she says she's a vampire, and he agrees. And she says it can't be real.
Yes.
Right? But she says it feels real, and that she's afraid she's misinterpreting it. And, like, he puts a hand on her waist and says it's okay. It can just be them. And she's, like, super ready for him to kiss her, and it's going to be her first kiss, but, like, her stomach is starting to, like, feel woozy, and, like, then her head, and then she feels unsteady, and she thinks it must be normal, and her limbs feel heavy, and she wants to drop to the ground, and he's just like, are you okay? But then she's in pain throughout her body, and the world turns pitch black. And we're like, what the fuck is happening? But I thought they were going to have sex finally.
I know.
But of course not.
No, not happening.
So then we get another quote, and it says, whoever did this will pay slowly, painfully. Of course. Who did this to you?
Who did it to you?
So she's in agony, and her stomach hurts like it's trying to digest itself, and she feels like she's gonna die, but she thinks she would welcome it because of the amount of pain she's in. And she can hear Lowe giving orders, and he sounds like super, like, flustered, which isn't normal for him. He's very good at, like, keeping his composure. So she's in and out of consciousness, and then she sees Dr. Averill, is what I'm calling him. And he is actually the, like, Collateral's official physician that she would see when she was in the human world, too.
Yeah, when she was a kid.
Yeah. So she just, like, looks at him, and she just says, not the mustache, because he has a new mustache, and she hates it. And he just tells her in the tongue that if she has the energy to question his appearance, maybe she doesn't need painkillers. But, like, he gives them to her as he's saying it. So he's kind of joking with her, but it's just kind of a cute moment. She hears him tell, I guess, Lowe that she'll deal with the poison, but then she's going to slip into a healing trance, and she'll look very still, and she'll look dead, but it's just the vampire way. Yeah. And Lowe asks how long, and the doctor says several hours, days maybe, but there's nothing he can do, and he just has to, like, make her comfortable and wait. And when she wakes up, she's going to need to feed, and he basically says she'll need to feed more than usual, so to make sure to have lots of blood on hand, and the fresher the better. And we're like, of course, she's gonna have to drink from Lowe. Mm-hmm. And then he obviously says he's gonna need to tell her father, and he might see it as an act of aggression or war declaration, and she, like, passes out after she hears that. Over some time, I guess, she comes to a little bit back and forth, and she hears someone tell Lowe that he needs to rest, but he says no, and then she hears them say that they're going to take Anna away, and Mick says that Anna might not have been the target, and they argue about it, but they, like, realize they can't risk it, so they're going to move her to a safe place. And Mick just says they all know that it was Emery, but Lowe says he knows no such thing. And, like, Mick is kind of trying to, like, get Anna to stay, and it's interesting. It's like, why? But Lowe basically says it's not up for discussion, and Mick asks where he's going to move her, and he says that's for him to know, so he's not going to tell anybody. And then she feels a cold lips on her palm, and then she hears misery, and that's it. We don't get what she heard. Is it like, was he going to say I love you? What was he going to say?
I don't know, but I wish we did.
I know. We need his point of view. So she comes out of the healing trance, and she sits up in bed, and she's not in pain, and she's, like, I guess, realizes she's wearing a t-shirt that's not hers, and she's wearing her, like, pretty lace underwear from her wedding that she hasn't worn since, and the house is completely silent, so it must be nighttime. So she walks outside of her room and trips over what she thinks is clothes, which is stupid. Yeah. But it's obviously a wolf. And it has green eyes.
I just don't understand how you trip over, like, I don't know, maybe am I the only person that, like, looks kind of, not constantly at my feet, but, like,
constantly. I'm always looking at my feet.
I guess I haven't really noticed, but I definitely notice when something is at my feet for me to step over.
Yeah. And, like, I get it, it's dark, but she's a vampire. She should be able to see in the dark.
And, like, especially if you're opening a door, like, the first thing you do is sort of, like, instinctually, you look where you're going. I don't understand how she trips.
Yeah, I don't know.
Stupid.
So, obviously, it's a wolf. And it has green eyes that she recognizes, and it's a white wolf. So she backs up and she closes her eyes because she doesn't want to see herself get murdered by the giant wolf. But he just pokes her and, like, herds her back to her room. And she then asks if he's definitely Lowe because she expected his fur to be the same color as his hair, which is dark, but obviously he's a white wolf. And he pushes her towards the bed and she just says she'll go back to sleep, but she wants to go to the closet. So he actually, like, goes and gets a pillow and a blanket and brings it to the closet for her. And she says he's so fluffy and he's cute. And she calls him a majestic fluff ball, which is cute. And then he pushes her into the closet and she lies down and says his alpha tendencies are even worse in this form. And he, like, licks her neck and she just says gross. And he, like, closes his teeth playfully around her arm in, like, a semi-threatening but more playful way. And she asks to pet him, and he, like, butts his head against her hand. So she does, and she asks him to stay, and he curls up beside her, and she inhales the smell of his heartbeat. And it's familiar and spicy and rich. And she falls asleep, like, twined up next to him, feeling safer than she ever has before. So it's sweet.
Yeah, it is sweet. So I feel like she has said previously that vampires don't dream. Mm-hmm. But, like, she does over, like, I guess after, like, he pushed her back into the closet and they curl up together, she falls asleep and she does dream. And she's, like, in a restless sleep. But, like, his presence and his touch, like, comforts her. And that fills him with pride and purpose. So that's our little snippet from his point of view. So, like, she doesn't think she dreams, but in her sleep, she's, like, restless, and she probably just doesn't remember her dreams. But he loves that his presence chills her out. So we get a little bit of backstory now from Misery about when her and Serena first sort of, like, decided to leave the compound, like, when they turned 18. So it said that Serena came to the Collateral residence at the end of January, and then they came of age, I guess, turned 18 at the beginning of April. And we sort of get, like, a flashback of what they were deciding to take with them into their new lives. So, like, when they were 18, what were they going to take with them? Then they see a new Collateral show up, who's a boy of 8 years old. And Misery told Serena that the Collateral, because they were like, oh, I wonder who that little boy is. And they were like, well, it's always somebody, it's always the child of somebody powerful, somebody in power. Mm-hmm. Because it makes a better deterrent.
Yeah.
But I sort of was like, I didn't understand why Misery ended up being the Collateral, because they say that it's usually the heir, but Owen is the heir. So I don't understand why Misery ended up being the Collateral when she's not the heir. I don't know either. Anyway. So Serena asks the kid, they're like, hey, you want to escape with us? Like, you want to come with us? Like, if you're here against your will. But he's like, no, being the Collateral is a privilege. So, like, he's brainwashed and he, like...
So brainwashed.
But, like, it was never like that for Misery. So, like, I feel like this sort of flashback is just us trying to show us that, like, Misery was always a bit different. Because she remembers begging her father to let her come home when she was 9.
Yeah.
And he obviously was like, hell no. So, like, it sort of just demonstrates, like, she never wanted to be the collateral and never thought of it the same way that all the vampires do. So, like, she's always been different.
Yeah.
And this event, this kid being like, oh no, it's a privilege and, like, all that, it caused Serena to really detest the entire collateral system. And, like, she wants to burn it to the ground. So, Serena really just, like, hates how the kids are mistreated. And she saw it. Like, she grew up with it.
Yeah.
So, Misery sort of thinks that, like, she didn't get it then. Like, Serena's anger. She didn't understand why she was so angry about the collateral system, but she because she was just sort of resigned, like, this is how the world is, like, why be angry about it?
Yeah.
And she says that for some reason she gets it now. And, like, she's furious. And I don't really understand why.
I don't know. Is it, like, because she met a child and cares about them, and she's like...
Yeah, maybe. But, like...
I don't know.
Anna's not the collateral, so I don't understand.
Yeah, I assume it's because they're making an assumption that Anna was the one that was supposed to be...
poisoned.
Which, you're like, doesn't really make any sense, but okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so... she wakes up, and she goes looking for Lowe, and she finds him, and he's in a meeting with all of his seconds, and she sees that he's giving instructions on something, and she just, like, leans against the wall to listen, and she's, like, looking at him, how handsome he is. And he, like, I assume, like, sense her presence, like, smells her, and then, like, looks at her and sees that she's there, like, leaning against the wall. And I'm pretty sure she is not. She's still wearing her t-shirt.
Yeah.
And just says out loud, "You should go." And she assumes that that's directed at her because he's looking at her.
Yeah.
So she's like, "Oh, yeah, sorry, my bad. Like, I'll head out." And she goes to leave. But then he walks over to her, and then all the seconds leave. She was like, "Oh, that was for everybody else." And it was really funny.
It is.
And once they're alone, she just asks him, like, how long was I out? And he tells her that she was out for 5 days. Like, that was a long time.
That is a long time.
And she asks, like, are we at war with the vampires now? Like... And he said no, but, like, it was pretty close. And they were like, what saved them was sort of the idea that the poison wasn't really meant for her. And it was like, they tested the peanut butter and it was a werewolf poison. So they were like, it might not have been intended for you, which is why the vampires were like, relented and they're not at war. Because, you know, by all accounts, she's a vampire. She doesn't need to eat human food. So they wouldn't have counted on her eating it. Like, there would be better ways to poison her, essentially.
Yeah, poison her blood bags. Like, that would make the most sense.
And, like, Anna's the only other person in the house that eats peanut butter, so it is stupid. Why? Like, peanut butter's delicious.
It's so good.
Anyway, so they managed to convince the vampire council that it wasn't meant for her. It was an unfortunate accident, and, you know, so they were like, okay. But she is really embarrassed that her dad knows that she ate peanut butter.
Yeah.
So Misery asks then, like, where Anna is, and he just tells her, like, she's safe, she's nowhere near here. And Misery's like, oh, right, yeah, like, that's definitely super confidential, like, just don't tell me. And, like, she's being really sincere. Like, she understands that it is, you know, it is something confidential that, like, he shouldn't spread around.
Yeah. Well, he already told Mick he wasn't going to tell him. Like.
But then he just straight up tells her immediately that Anna is with Cohen and no one else knows. And I'm like, do you know what? I appreciate this moment. Like, he trusts her implicitly. However, anyone who knows Lowe at all could very quickly and easily guess where Anna is. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
100%.
Like, everyone's like, it's like, oh, it's the height of secrecy. I can't tell anyone where she is. And it's like, what's the one place you would trust? Like, you literally sent her to the only other place that you would trust her to be. So, like, in my brain, it's not a great, like, it's not very secretive.
No, it's like one of those, we're gonna put you here because it's the last place they'd expect, because it's the most obvious place. And you're like, that never works.
It's true. Anyway, so he then, like, sort of updates her and says, like, they have no idea who poisoned the peanut butter. They don't know if it was Emery. Like, they're monitoring her communication, but, like, she hasn't said anything to anyone. So they really don't know. Yeah. Like, they don't know who it is. But Lowe wants to move her too. He wants her to be safe too. So he's like, maybe you should either go back with the vampires, or go with the humans, or go with Cohen with Anna. And, like, he was like, I don't even have to tell your dad if you don't want me to, but, like, I'm gonna take care of you, make sure you're safe and free. Because I guess nice. Very nice. But she's like, no. She's like, no, I'm gonna stay here. And he's like, but I feel guilty that I almost got you killed. And I was right.
That's your emotion, not mine.
And he was like, I was literally right there. You ate it in front of me. And she's like, yeah, so that's why I should stay and be even closer to you. You were too far away when it happened. Anyway, it was sort of like a woo moment. And he asks her, like, then how she's feeling. And I'm wondering if this is sort of a, like, how are you feeling? Are you up for some sex?
Yeah.
But she just says she feels really gross. And then he's like, yeah, you sweated through the sheets a bunch. And I had to change them. And she's just like, oh, God. Like, she's so embarrassed.
Yeah.
And then he even tells her, he says, Juno did help when I could stand to let someone else touch you. And
interesting.
Yeah, and he's like, I found it really hard to let someone else, like, near you when you were hurt or sick. And, like, he's like, I can't stand seeing you like that. But then...
What does that mean?
I know, but then he even goes further and says, scratch that. I don't like anyone touching you ever. Like, not even just when you're hurt or sick. Ever. No one else can touch you. And I'm just like, hello, obvious. Like, girl. And, like, I get it. You don't know because you're a different species. But, like, come on.
Don't you read the books?
Anyway, but then he even adds on the end that, like, he doesn't know who to trust anymore, because I guess it had to have been somebody living in the house to poison the peanut butter.
Yeah.
Right? Someone would have seen a stranger. So, like, now it's like, well, who was it?
Mm-hmm.
So she just tells him she's gonna stay and she's gonna help. And then she smells herself and just, actually, I'm gonna shower because I stink.
Fair.
And I'm like, this is great. Not sexy, but great. Like, anyway, so, he agrees that she stinks. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then he carries her up into the bathroom and runs the tub for her. So that's cute.
Sweet.
And she knows that, like, he has a mate, but she also knows that there is something between them. But she knows better to ask. like, she says she knows better than to ask for all or nothing. And, like, decides. So I guess, like, she is deciding in her head now that she's gonna take that step. Because they haven't really taken it yet. Yeah. And she just decides, like, she knows that they don't have a future, but she's gonna take what happiness she can get while she can. Which is, like, really sad for her. Like, she's just like, I know that I'm not first choice. And it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Well, she's nobody's first choice. Like, that's her whole jam.
So, she strips. But she does. She's just like, I'm just gonna take that step
it's just like,
take off all my clothes. And I'm like, yeah, for a virgin, I keep saying this, for a virgin, like, you are very forward.
Yeah. I guess when you know, you know.
Yeah. So he, like, obviously checks her out before she gets in the bath. And he gets a cloth to wash her, and they have, like, a weird conversation about sponges versus cloths. And, like, I think she just makes an offer to let him use his hand instead. And I'm like, that's weird. Like, don't you put soap on the cloth or the sponge or something? Like, what's he gonna do with his hand?
Put soap on it.
I guess. I don't... Anyway, I'm not... It's just weird. So, she takes his hand, because he's like... Initially, he's like, no, I shouldn't. And she's like... It's like she says that she can sense that he needs this. But... She needs... Like, he needs to use his hand. Like, he wants to.
He wants to touch her.
But, like, he's hesitating. So she just, I guess, takes it in... Not...
To her own hands.
I was gonna say that, but I was like, but she doesn't. She takes
it into his hands.
She takes his hand and puts it on her leg. And so, like, she can see that he has this, like, need to touch her. So she's just, like, giving him permission, essentially.
Yeah.
But it sort of brings back that, like, selfless thing that he was talking about last week. About how, like, his mate is really selfless, and if he said that he needed her, then she would stay for him. And, like, this is sort of, like, I found that it sort of was like that, because she's like, I can sense that this is what he needs. And, like, not saying she doesn't want it.
Yeah.
But she's thinking about what he needs in this moment, not what she wants or needs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So he does, like, I guess I can't really 100% remember if he, like, I think he does maybe, like, run his hand on her leg, but then he stops. And then he kisses the spot on the back of her neck that he marked her. Like, she's thinking, like, he really likes that spot, because he keeps coming back to it. And she thinks, like, they are different species, and, like, it may take them a bit of time to figure stuff out. And, like, it's just funny, because then she just asks out loud, how do bears have sex? And he's just like, why? Are you worried? And she's like, no, I'm not. And then he's like, I would never hurt you. And she's like, no, I know. So, like, we don't really get an anatomy lesson.
Yet.
So he just, like, continues to touch her and, like, wash her with his hand. But he doesn't get to the vagine. But he goes everywhere else. And he's, like, being really gentle. And, like, she feels like he's taking his time to discover every spot. Like, he's mapping her body. And, like, she's really having a good time. So then she guides his hand to her vagine. And I'm like, this is bold. Like, bold. To be like, touch me here now. And then she tells him, like, she really wants it. And
she wants the D.
Well, and she's like, please. She's like, please. And, like, he sort of is not super on board at first. He's sort of like, oh, I probably shouldn't. But then she's like, says please. And he's like, okay. You said please. You use your manners. So, like, then he rubs her clit. And he keeps going. So, he brings up then the night that they first met and how he thought about doing this to her. And how she looked...
Her wedding night?
She looked cold. And I'm like, she looked cold so you think, I'll finger her and that'll make it better.
Yeah, exactly.
But he just said he wanted to take her away and get her a blanket.
Okay.
But then he also said that he wanted to make her come with his mouth so much that she couldn't take it anymore. And I'm like, that's more like it.
That's what we're looking for here.
And then she comes. And then she asks if they can kiss because they haven't yet.
Yeah. Yep. She's never had her first kiss.
But she's had an orgasm. 2 orgasms.
Yep, with him.
Anyway, but, like, and so, like, he is okay. He's like, oh, yeah. But then she's like, I'm worried that I'll hurt you with my fangs. And he just says, like, he didn't mind when she bit him before, and he won't mind now. And then he kisses her, and, like, it takes them, you know how, like, it takes you a second sometimes, like, to get into a rhythm?
Well, it's her first kiss, so I do appreciate that it's like, and she's not amazing.
So it takes them a second to get the hang of it, but then it's hot and messy and feral. Like, they're both really going for it. And she can tell that he wants more. So again, with this whole selfless thing, like, she's thinking of him. So she stands up to get out of the tub, and he towels her off, and he admits to her that he was so scared when she went limp in his arms. And she's like, yeah, me too. And then he lifts her into his arms and carries her to her room. And she thinks they're going to the bed. But instead they go to the closet.
Fair. That's where she sleeps.
And then he tells her that she smells like she just came. And she's like, yeah.
Because I did.
And he's like, I'm sorry, I need to eat you out. And then he says it's a werewolf thing. And I'm like, it's just, I don't know. I love that. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's just one of those things that, like, in real life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, sure, there are definitely people that are very eager. But then you also have a lot of people that are not very eager. So, like, I just find it amusing that in a lot of romance books, one of the key takeaways is the main love interest loves being down there. Loves it. Loves the taste and the smell and, like, is very enthusiastic about it. So I think it's really funny that in this book it's like, he needs to. It's a biological imperative right now.
Yeah. And you're like, is it? Or is he just saying that?
Yeah. Anyway, it's just funny. So he licks her out and talks about how amazing and unreal she is. And then he uses his fingers with his mouth. And then she comes again. And then he comes in his pants. Yep. It's like, yeah. Like, that's how turned on he was just from licking her out. And then he tells her that he wants to lock her in the closet forever.
It's like, that's a lot.
Do that forever. And she's like, Yeah, I think I'd be okay with that.
Okay.
And they're about to keep going when his phone rings. And I feel like he's not originally going to answer it, but then he looks at who it is, and so he answers it, and it's for Misery, so he passes her the phone. And I actually think it's like a video call. It's not just a phone call.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Wild.
so like it's her brother, Owen. He's there. He's just calling to check on her because he heard that she was poisoned and almost died. And he's like, you need to come home because obviously you're not safe there. But then like Lowe peeks in on screen and he's like, her safety is my top priority. And obviously Owen can tell that they are not decent. Like, they are in various states of undress. And he's like, oh, so you guys are fucking, obviously. And they're like, yeah. And it's just like, okay, awkward. And then he's like, tries to talk to her about Serena because the last time they communicated, he said, like, if he finds anything out, he would let her know. So he's like, gonna talk to her in the tongue because that's how they've been communicating so far. But she's like, no, you can say it in English, like, indicating that she trusts Lowe with whatever is going to be said. And I guess Owen tells them that Serena's apartment was broken into 3 days ago. And they don't know who it was, but whoever it was wrecked the place.
Not good.
And he has something else to tell them, but whatever it is, it has to be done in person. I guess he doesn't trust the wires.
Yeah.
All those wires that are connecting.
On cell phones.
Yes. All those wires. And Lowe just says, okay, give me a few hours and I can arrange it. And then Owen just tells him to get the fucking out of their system before people find out. And then he hangs up. So, like, I do like how, like, he's realistic. Right? He's not, like, oh, you guys shouldn't do that. He's like, just get it out of your systems. Right? Like,
yeah.
I like that he's like, people aren't gonna like this, so maybe just fuck it out.
Figure it out, yeah.
So, after they hang up on Owen, they're gonna get right back to business, like, to where they were before. But then Lowe's phone rings again. And it's Pack. I know, Jesus. It's Pack business. He has to go.
Of course.
Yep, they get interrupted. No sex. So he leaves her in the closet and she goes to sleep. She's only in the closet because she's the sunlight during the day, right?
Well, we don't really talk about it. I assume it's like a trauma thing, but it's never really brought up.
Interesting. Okay, so she wakes up in the middle of the night and remembers that she is starving, which I found really funny. So, like, she woke up, went down to find Lowe, has this whole meeting with him. They have a bath. They have sexy times. And all along, she's like, it's fine. And now she's like, oh, wait, I was hungry.
Yeah. And, like, even the doctor was like, she needs to eat lots and soon.
So she goes downstairs to the kitchen for a blood bag, or two. And Lowe and Alex are down there. And Alex goes and hugs Misery and thanks her for what she did for Anna. As in, taking the poison for her. And Misery's like, I didn't do it on purpose. But Alex is like, no, but, like, I know you want to protect her, and I know you would, like, if, you know, you totally would do it. So, like, they are all seeing, maybe they're giving her a bit too much credit, but they are all seeing that she does care about Anna.
Yeah.
And she's just like, sorry to interrupt, I'm just here for some food, and then she remembers Sparkles. She's like, oh my god, has anyone been feeding the cat?
It's like, you haven't been feeding the cat the entire time you were here.
And then they're like, oh, Anna took him with her. She's like, oh, okay, good. Then Alex explains that he did find the connection, the Serena connection. And she said they found he didn't say Anna's father, because he doesn't know that he's looking for Anna's father. Yeah. He just says he's found sort of what Misery asked him to find earlier, like the whole human werewolf bureau thing. So he said he found results. He said that the human were bureau workers list wasn't where it was supposed to be. So he dug around and he found a list, and he recognized a name connected to Serena, Thomas Jalakis, who was a human compter of public accounts. I don't know what that means, but that was his title.
No idea.
And apparently Serena had interviewed him for an article that never got released. And, like, apparently she emailed him and she met him in person. However, there's nothing in his history about working for the Bureau. He worked there 8 years ago for 11 months, just shy of a year.
8 years?
8 years ago. Yeah.
Makes sense.
And Alex doesn't know that he just found Anna's dad. So they just dismiss him. And she's like, let's go talk to him. But Lowe's like, we can't. He died 2 weeks after Serena disappeared. And they look at his picture, and turns out he looks a lot like Anna. So, like, any doubt, like, you know how we always say that they're leaping to conclusions? And, like, they kind of are here, but then they see his picture and they're like, oh no, they look very similar.
Yeah, and it's like, if he looks that similar, wouldn't Alex have noticed when he found him?
I think he sort of does suspect. And I think he sort of asks, like, is this Anna's father? And they're just like, you're dismissed. So it turns out that this guy, Thomas Jalakis, was appointed by Governor Davenport. So they want to talk to him. And luckily Lowe's like, yeah, I got us an invite for dinner tomorrow at their house. To give them a gift, because I guess they hosted the wedding. So they're gonna go and give them a gift to thank them for hosting the wedding. So she thanks him for finding this lead, and she's really excited because, like, this is sort of a concrete path to follow, and they haven't really had much so far. He is less excited because he doesn't like the idea of bringing her into enemy territory.
Yeah.
But then she just starts to cramp because, again, she came down for food and she doesn't have it yet. So she starts to cramp. She can feel... It's actually really gross. She talks about how it's like her body eating itself.
Yeah.
And he tells... So, like, she goes to get a blood bag from the fridge and he's like, I don't want you to use that. And initially she thinks that, like, he might think that the blood was tampered with. But she just says that, like, it's sealed, it's fine, like, don't worry about it. But he's like, no, I want you to use me. And I'm just like, woo. But, like, again, she needs a lot, so...
Yeah.
Anyway, so she explains, like, I asked my brother about this. And I'm just like, girl, you need to eat. Stop talking and just eat something.
100%.
So she explains, like, maybe we shouldn't because it does create long-term bonds and it's meant for people with deep feelings for each other. And he's like, don't we have those already? And she's just trying to explain, like, there are consequences. And he just laughs and he's like, we're already a consequence. Like, we're already dealing with the consequences. In other words, like, their relationship is already established and that's already something to deal with, so... Anyway, and then she just thinks, like, she knows this isn't going to end well because she has come second her entire life. So, like, after the safety of all vampires by her dad, Owen, Serena valued her freedom more than Misery's company. And she says that Lowe actually treats her like she isn't runner-up, even though she knows she is, because he already has a mate. And she knows this is going to hurt her in the long run, but she's just decides, like, fuck it, I'll deal with that in the future.
Yeah.
So she tells him that, okay, but I should avoid your neck in case, like, people notice. And he's like, do we care? But she's more like, well, we don't want your pack to... I guess she's worried that his pack is gonna, like, think...
Well, what her brother implied it already. That the pack would be pissed.
So, she goes for his wrist or his forearm instead. Still hot. But, like, I also feel like a forearm bite is still visible. Like, yeah.
You gotta go inner thigh.
Yeah. Is it bad that you said that and all I could think of is, like, she's biting his inner thigh and his penis is slapping her face?
I love it.
That was my thought process. It's fine.
It's what would happen.
So I guess she is biting his wrist and then he bites her in return. Like, not hard enough to break skin, but enough to leave a mark on her.
We're not worried about people seeing that.
And then he marks her again, like the back of her neck thing, and tells her that of all good things he's felt in his life, she is the best.
But he
has another mate out somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So she finishes eating, and I don't know what else to call it. And he brings her to his room this time, and then he puts her on his bed. And he admits that he didn't change them for the longest time because they smelled like her. So when she snuck into his room...
She roll around on his bed? Like, what the fuck? No. I don't think so.
Interesting. And he said that he would jerk off to fantasies of her. And I'm like, girl... He is obsessed with you.
Yeah.
I don't understand why you still think his mate is Gabby.
Yeah.
And then he starts to lick and kiss the back of her neck, and he tells her he loves her ears, and they discover that it's sensitive in a sexy way.
Yeah.
He gets naked then, and he, like, rubs his penis, like, sort of in between her bum, and then she suggests a condom, but he's like, we don't need one. And she's just like, yeah, but, like, we already know that humans and wares can make babies, so, like, it could be possible for us to too. And he just says that, like, he's like, we're not gonna be having sex.
And we're like, what the fuck is happening?
And he's like, we aren't compatible like that. And he doesn't want to hurt her. And she doesn't really understand why, because she's like, I just find it such an odd conversation to be having when they're both naked in bed and, like, getting jiggy with it. She's like, well, why? Like, haven't you been with humans before? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, and you haven't heard them? And he's like, no. And she's like, well, biologically, my parts are very similar to human parts. And he says he would want to finish with her because of who she is to him. Yes.
What does that mean?
And we're all like, oh, so obviously there's something different about the fact that she's his mate that biologically makes her different. And she doesn't understand, and she's sort of pissed off that he didn't tell her that they wouldn't be having penetrative sex.
They should have had this conversation before they both got naked. Yeah.
But he convinces her that, like, we can do other things, and he, like, gets her in the mood for those things. And he asks if she's done anything before, and she's like, nope. Because she said that, like, because she was lying to the humans about who she was as an adult, like, she filed down her teeth and, you know, she didn't tell anyone she was a vampire. So she thought that made it weird. Like, she didn't want to then lie to them about, you know what I mean? Like, she didn't want to have sex with them while lying to them.
Yeah, which I guess is fair.
And she said vampires were never an option because I guess as the collateral,
they all hate her.
Which I'm sorry, I will never understand.
No, me neither.
Was a child, was chosen as the collateral against her will, did it to help them, and they all hate her guts? I'm so confused by it. Anyway, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's all fine. Anyway, so he wants her to feed from him again and tells her that she is beautiful, and he thought so even when he saw her picture, like even before he saw her and smelled her, like he was captivated by her. So it's sort of like giving us the idea that, like, even though it is a mate thing and he smelled her and was like, mate, yes, he just tells her that, like, even before that, he thought she was great.
Which is interesting, because I thought that we got that he didn't even look at her picture.
He must have lied?
Because, like, they told him that the person changed, and they were like, do you want to look at her file? And he was like, I don't care. And, like, sure, maybe he decided to change his mind and check the file after, but he was like, they're all the same. So it kind of implied that he hadn't looked at her file at all, but I don't know. I guess he has since.
Yeah. So she thinks then that she wishes she was his mate. But then she's like, no, stop thinking about that, me.
That's a terrible thing
idea
to think. Like, is it?
So she bites him and drinks and then gives him a handy, and then she's like rubbing herself on his leg, and then she comes and he doesn't stop coming. And then he asks, like, do you want to know why we aren't compatible? And he takes her hand and puts it on the base of his cock, and she feels a swelling. And he loves her touching it, and it keeps swelling. And she says it's like it wants to be contained and enclosed within something. And she looks down and realizes, oh shit, maybe we aren't compatible.
I do like that she's just like, oh, you might be right.
So, I guess, those of us that have read Werewolf,
Omegaverse.
Yeah, before.
A lot of those.
It's,
mating.
you know, that's the knot. You know, it's designed to.
Which I wasn't necessarily expecting in this book, so it was kind of a surprise.
Because it is a very specific sort of lore, we'll say. Yeah.
And I do think this is part of the reason why some people didn't love this book, is because they weren't expecting this.
Anyway, so it's an interesting twist to their sexual journey, is that he has a knot. And it balloons inside. Which just seems inconvenient.
Yeah.
Especially if it's not controllable.
Yeah, but it is like... It is something that is part of, like, dog and wolf anatomy in real life. Like, yeah.
I didn't know that.
And Google says some foxes. Dogs get stuck when mating. A breeding tie occurs when the gland at the end of the male's penis swells up and is gripped by the contracting muscles of the female's vagina, preventing the two from being separated.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, like, I get why it's a common thing.
Well, all right.
Yeah.
Great. So, our next little, his quote, his thought is that she makes him laugh. It's no small gift. Which is nice. It's cute.
Yeah.
So Misery and Lowe head to the human territory to buy the governor a present as a thank you for hosting their wedding. So they go to a few antique stores and they bicker over what to get before they realize that, like, they don't actually care if the people like the gift. So, like, they just go and buy a really, like, a $300 ugly antique ashtray. They're like, why do we even care? Like, why are we fighting over what we get this person we don't like?
Yeah. It'd be like a cute moment in a rom-com of them, like, arguing over and then being like, wait a second. We don't care.
So, she asks, like, where pack money comes from, because they spent over $300, and she's like, how do you have that money? And he just says, like, actually, most wares have jobs, and he had one before, which we knew, like, he was an architect, but PACs have a comprehensive investment portfolio that takes care of PAC financials and infrastructure.
Yeah.
Unlike vampires, whose leadership positions are hereditary, so they rely on estates passed down over generations. And I'm just like, of course all of the supernatural people are rich. I'm like, I don't think I've ever read a supernatural book where the supernaturals in question did not have money.
Yeah, I guess it would make it hard. But it would be an interesting story if, like,
Anyway, just sort of annoying a little bit. So, they have, like, these cute romantic times in the car, and he's obviously really attentive and sweet, and he tells her that he can't wait to get her home. Yes.
Ooh.
And she sort of, like, she likes that, but at the same time, she's thinking about how, it does feel like home, but she doesn't want it to feel like home.
Yeah, because she's going to be leaving.
Like, she's only there for the year, so, like, she almost doesn't want to get attached.
Yeah.
So they go right to the Davenports, or I don't know if they go right there, but, like, they head there for dinner, and Mr. Davenport's, like, halfway drunk, and he makes an effort to invite her in. So, like, she's, like, thinking in her head that the vampires didn't mention that they don't actually need an invitation to go into homes. But, like, they've let the humans think that they do.
I love it.
Too. So funny. The governor, like, sort of pokes into their marriage a little bit and asks, like, if they fight. And then it's like, oh, you must fight about the Aster. And Lowe's like, what the heck is the Aster? And Misery has to explain that it's the last time they tried a union between a werewolf and a vampire. And I don't know if we got any of that in the beginning.
Yeah, they talked about the Aster in the beginning, because they're like, this is going to be a second Aster, because everyone's going to get murdered.
And he tells her that the werewolves call it the sixth wedding. And says that it was actually an act of revenge because the vampire groom mistreated his werewolf bride during the previous marriage. So, like, it's just sort of demonstrating that they have different interpretations of history and, like, they're taught different things.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so, like, it's just, like, I feel like the governor's trying to, like, poke and prod at them and be like, oh, look, fight, fight, fight. But, like, neither of them seem too bothered by it. They're just like, oh, that's interesting. That's how you guys were taught it, and we were taught it like this. And they don't fight about it. So then they sit down to dinner, and Lowe, the governor tells Lowe that Misery's dad and him get together once a month to talk business. And Misery's kind of peeved at that because she's like, wow, so he gets together with this guy once a month, but when I was the collateral, he only visited me once a year. Which is shitty.
Very.
And Lowe sort of brings up his mom in conversations, like, oh, do you remember my mom, sort of a thing, and says that he worked with the Human Wear Bureau with someone named Thomas, and they're just trying to, like, get information. And the governor remembers, oh yeah, I remember your mom, and tells Lowe that, like, oh, unfortunately Thomas died recently, and that he's sure that Lowe's mom would remember him because he got around. And sort of insinuated that he was a man whore and that, like, by, I guess, like, that meant that Lowe's mom was also sleeping around. Like, whatever he said, it was insulting.
Yeah. It's also weird, because it's like, aren't we pretending that they don't sleep together? Isn't that, like, what the whole everyone's thing is? Like, the species don't mix. Yeah. But he's like, yeah, he really got around. Your mom's a whore. Like, okay.
Anyway, so whatever the insult was, that gets Lowe pissed off, and then he, like, pins the governor against the wall and accuses him of smelling of lies. It's a handy trick.
Yeah, I do. I wish I could smell lies.
And Lowe just asks, like, why he had Thomas killed, and he initially won't answer. He's like, I didn't, I'm innocent, blah, blah, blah. But he won't let him go, and then finally he admits that that Thomas was talking to a reporter about embezzling in the governor's administration. And he just said, like, we didn't want to, we had to.
He's so ridiculous.
But it does just turn out that, like, it's sort of an unrelated thing. You know what I mean? Like, that's not really related to, although it does make me think that, like, they assumed that Thomas was talking to Serena, the reporter, and they assumed, oh, that must be about the embezzling, not realizing that it probably wasn't.
Well, I wonder if they started talking because of the embezzling, and then things changed. Like, then she got information about Anna or something, but, like, I don't know. I don't know if we ever really get how it happened, but...
Anyway, so after that, they just leave. They get in the car, and, like, Misery is racking her brain about Serena and Thomas, and she's trying to figure out why Anna's name was in Serena's planner. And Lowe just has an idea that maybe Serena learned of Anna from someone else and was using that information to blackmail Thomas. And...
to get a story. It's like...
and, like... Misery's trying to be like, she wasn't like that, I know her, and, like, it just seems like Lowe is sort of starting to believe that, like, maybe Misery didn't know her as well as she thinks.
Which everyone keeps doing. Like, everyone's gaslighting her.
And then he suggests, like, maybe Serena did just up and leave, and, like, maybe she's not in danger, maybe she's hiding out somewhere to wait until all this cools down. And Misery's just, like, she's just exhausted of having to solidify her relationship with Serena and trying to convince someone else that Serena did care about her and wouldn't have just left without saying anything.
Yeah.
Then Misery thinks about the fight that her and Serena had before she left. And I say left, disappeared. And Serena just wanted Misery to care about something. And Misery's thinking, like, wouldn't it be a wild plan of Serena to make Misery care by leaving Sparkles the cat and making Misery take care of him. So she's like, oh my god, like, what if she did just disappear on purpose? And she just wants me to start caring about something.
But why a cat? Like, yeah.
But, yeah.
I guess.
I know, why a cat? But then she also thinks that that would mean that Serena would have hurt a child. Which I don't get.
I guess she's just saying it's not in her nature to use a child as blackmail.
But I also don't understand,
but...
like, so if she disappeared on her own, that doesn't necessarily mean that she had to have done the blackmail, right? Like, they're two mutually independent things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I think that's a leap that wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
And obviously she thinks, like, Serena would not have hurt a child. She wasn't like that.
Yeah. Which is kind of probably why we got that flashback that we got a little while ago about her being like, if you want to leave, we'll take you with us. To show her character and make the reader understand that she's not the type of person that would use a child for blackmail.
So they leave the governor's house and they head right to the vampire human border to meet Owen. And she's really happy to see him. But then a woman gets out of the car and it's a werewoman, Gabby, Lowe's mate.
Oh no.
Yeah. And it's weird because Lowe holds her hand and, like, stays next to her as they lean against the trunk of the car. And Owen and Gabby approach them. And, like, she's sort of worried about Lowe and Gabby. Like, about Gabby, like, seeing them hold hands, I guess. And she sort of watches them and, like, they greet each other and they speak politely and warmly, but, like, that's it. Like, they sort of talk like they kind of know each other, but they're not, like, super intimate.
Yeah.
So Owen tells them then, so we just said, like, he tells us earlier that Serena's apartment was broken into. He managed to get a hold of security footage, but it was tampered with. And I guess the way he explains what it looked like, Serena realizes that it was done. Well,
Gabby.
I guess Serena says, oh, it was with jammers, and Gabby's like, yeah, that's what I suspected as well.
Misery says
yes.
It was with jammers?
My bad,
you said
sorry.
Serena.
Oh my god.
I didn't know who you were talking
about. There's too many people. So, so I guess the way Owen describes the video, Misery is like, oh, that sounds like jammers. And Gabby is like, yeah, I also had that idea.
Yeah, I kind of like that they start talking and, like, the men don't understand what they're talking about. It's kind of like a nice moment that I just appreciate two smart women having a conversation.
And then Owen just tells her, like, oh, Gabby is sort of mentioned that she's close to Owen. Like, he's the only one that talks to her at the nest. And she actually tells Misery, she's like, I'm really sorry that you're dealing with your friend missing. And she's like, that's the first time someone has said that. Yeah. Owen then tells her the real reason he wanted to meet was to tell her that he plans on taking over their father's seat on the council. So this is a hereditary position. And he just says, I don't agree with the decisions he's been making, so he's making a bid. And Misery's like, that's treason. Because our dad is still alive.
She's like, right? He is still alive? You didn't forget to mention that?
And also, the penalty of treason is death. So he is really, he's like really, his life is on the line here if he doesn't do this correctly. Yeah. And Misery's like really unhappy about it, but Owen's like, it'll be fine.
Very nonchalant.
Yeah. And she's sort of like, you can't just up and decide this. And he's like, I've been planning this for 3 months. And he said he started planning it when he found out that her dad was sending her into enemy territory again. And it's actually really sweet because he says he couldn't do anything about it when they were kids, so he wanted to take a stand now. And I thought that was really cute.
It is sweet. Yeah.
And then he just says he wants to destroy the collateral system and stop enforcing non-existent borders. So he wants to get rid of the vampire-human werewolf borders.
Interesting. Like, I don't know how this is going to go if there is a second book, because, like, there's so many vampires and obviously werewolves that are against that, and the humans also hate them. So, like, I get that Europe has its own system that's different where they all live together, but it just seems very hard to make that a possibility here.
But he wants to try. And Lowe essentially just, like, gives him his support. He's like, that sounds great. I'm also against the collateral system. So he then has, like, sort of a private-ish chat with Gabby. It's not private. I guess they're getting ready to leave, and he just wants a few minutes to talk to her. But, like, they're not quiet enough. Like, everybody can hear what they're saying. So he just asks if she needs anything, and she tells him that, like, not really. She spends her days working on her master's and playing video games, and, like, everybody essentially ignores her.
But she's fine with it. It's kind of good.
And Misery is, like, feeling jealous. And she thinks that, like, they're gonna hug and, like, she's just waiting for a moment.
Yeah.
And she remembers Lowe saying that he would take any fraction of her life that she chose to give.
Mm-hmm.
And she sort of can't bear to look. So she goes to the car. But I guess she does look. Like, nothing happens. They just wave at each other, and Lowe gets in the car with her. And they start to drive back to, I guess, Lowe's house. And he is smiling. And Misery finds that odd. Because she's like, theoretically, he might never see his mate again. Because, you know, she could die. Because Misery could die. Like, you know.
Yeah, it could start a war. Somebody could just assassinate her like they've tried to do to Misery a bunch of times.
And he just doesn't seem affected at all.
Yeah.
And she really thought for sure they were mates. But, like, after what he's described to her about mates, she's like, I don't know what's going on, but I know after seeing them together that Lowe and McGabby are not mates.
Ooh.
So it seems like maybe she's close to figuring out that it's not Gabby, it's her. You know what I mean? Like, well, she's figured out that it's not Gabby, but, like, we're getting there that it'll be, maybe hopefully soon she'll figure out that it's her.
Yeah. Well, she has to. There's only a quarter of the book.
Next week's our last week, so yeah, you're right. It's got to clue up somewhere.
Something's got to give. So yeah, that's it for this week. If you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions, please reach out to us by email at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com, or on Instagram or Facebook at coffeeandcoread and coffee.coread on TikTok.
So next week we will be reading the end of this book, chapters 25 to the epilogue. Make sure to follow along. And if you're enjoying our chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you get our content. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you on the next page.